Hi everyone. So next up is Juho Glad from Good Game Studio, and he's going to talk about starting an independent studio and making his first game, Fall Man. So welcome, Juho.
So I'm Juho Glad, and I have a tiny indie game studio called Glad Game Studio. It's basically me and my wife helping with some business stuff and things. I just released my first ever game 2 months ago. It's called Fall Man. It's an iOS title. And the game got featured by Apple and in the App Store, and it has been showcased in indie showcases at events like EGX London and PAX East. And I'm traveling next week to exhibit it in Gamescom as part of the Indie Arena booth there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the game. I have a short video here. It's a game about trampoline jumping. Okay, the game is pretty simple, so more than talk about tools and tech stuff, I was planning to talk about the experience of starting from scratch and making a game from start to finish on my own. About my background, before making this game, I have been working as a service designer, creating digital services and user experiences, user interfaces, pretty much my whole professional career. And then one day I just started to think that after a long while of making client project work, it would be nice to do something for myself for a change. And why I chose to make a game instead of an oil painting or clay pot or something like that, the reason is that I've been playing video games for 30 years, ever since I got the Commodore 64 for Christmas, and I've always kind of wanted to make a game of my own as well. And yeah, games have been an important form of media for me. So one evening about a year ago, I just started making one. But basically it was mainly just for myself to kind of force me to learn new stuff and try to do something productive with my spare time. So I started working on the game totally as a hobby project, working on it after work and when the kids had gone to sleep. I have 2 small kids at home, so that kind of restricts the free time you have to work on your own projects. I have a degree in computer science from the Helsinki University of Technology, but I haven't really programmed anything since the university days, but I had a technical background. And I've also used to make some music just for myself way back, first on the Commodore 64 and then later for a short while on the PC. And I've also drawn some random illustration stuff and every now and then and done some animation stuff. So I kind of thought that maybe I could do something that at least resembles a game, completely on my own. Besides, I didn't really know anyone in game development, so I really had no choice either. So I'm guessing most gamers have some great idea for a game they have been thinking for a while, and so did I. It's this kind of ambitious, awesome game with modular story structure, and there's a submarine and everything. But that wasn't the game I was going to make. I had read enough about game development that you shouldn't try to do the greatest RPG ever created as your first game, or you'll end up finishing nothing most likely. So I needed something smaller, something a quick and dirty practice project for my first game, and then maybe start from there and slowly start working my way towards the dream game. I had talked with a friend of mine from my day job about like mobile games every now and then, and he had this list of like game ideas, and one of them was a like trampoline jumping game. And for some reason, I had thought about that a little bit, and basically the game mechanic, how the controls would work on a touchscreen device, and I had come up with this idea of like combining like timing-based jumping and then this gesture-based trick mechanic. And so I thought I can just like try to prototype that as my first thing. So basically, I just started making something without thinking about it too much. But on the other hand, I kind of knew what I didn't want to make, because I felt there were a lot of like these typical App Store games, like really casual games, and it probably wouldn't be wise for me to try to compete with those, because there are like already tons of talented people with years and years of experience working on those. So I thought that I want to make something a bit different, and like a game I would love to find on the App Store, like maybe a bit weird game with like personality, but make it as polished and enough depth to the gameplay that I was, as a gamer, satisfied with it. The other key decision in the beginning was about the visual style of the game. I also kind of thought that many of the character-based games on the App Store looked kind of similar. They had this super cute, cartoony look, so I thought that I don't want to do that. And I also like pixel art as much as the next guy, but that also felt for a little bit like a too obvious choice for an indie game. So what I ended up with was this like a 50s travel poster look, or inspired by this look, because yeah, I thought the style looks good, and it hasn't been used that much in games, and it maybe stands out a bit, and I can pull it off on my own. So that's what I went with. Yeah, so the first actual thing I made was this little mood piece concept animation thing. It's just a simple Flash thing, because I wanted to get some feel how my kind of vision would work as a game. Let's see if it runs on it. Yeah, so it's just a silly-looking guy jumping up and down, and with some pieces of background art stolen from a Google image search. But I think it's kind of important, especially for a small game, to feel like a thought-out, cohesive whole, that all the different elements work together. And besides, I needed some placeholder graphics to start working on the code, so I could, I had some pieces I could use for that. And later I created a new guy to replace that one, and also made some background art of my own. These were actually first sketched on an iPad, because as a father of 2 kids, I often found that I can kind of sneak some work time into our family time by taking the iPad with me while we are, for example, watching TV together or something like that, instead of hiding behind a laptop somewhere. I also had, in the beginning, plans to add story content to the game, mainly because why on earth would there be story content in a sports game? But I outlined a backstory for the guy, and it's kind of a bit melancholy story about this athlete who was a big star in the 80s and then kind of became this tabloid guy, and then eventually disappeared from the publicity, and the player would find these, or get these diary pages or letters the guy was writing to his daughter, which kind of told the story. And I was thinking about some real-life athletes, and about how they can be the very best in the world in some one single thing, but at least some of the time pretty terrible in everything else, so kind of suck in life in general. So there were themes of rising up and falling down, and also I thought that in the idea of professional sports, about like mastering something that is actually pretty useless in real life. I thought the game itself kind of reflects that as well. You can become really good at making these gestures and combos in the game, but it's not really a useful skill at all outside of the game. But in the end, I ended up scrapping the story because I thought it might be a bit too heavy for the game, so I went with unlockable hats and crazy power moves instead. But I guess something of the story remains there, at least in spirit, because after the game was out, one Russian site made a review of the game. It was titled "Fall Man Between Heaven and Earth," and there was this long paragraph of like flavor text, this kind of heartbreaking story about the guy and his background, and it was totally made up by the reviewer, but it was kind of close to what I had been thinking. Yeah, I also needed some music for the guy to jump to, and after a long break, I had recently started to make some loops and unfinished songs on the iPad. There was this app called Core Gadget I really liked, and it has all these like synthesizers and beatboxes in there. So I thought that maybe like a cheesy, sporty, a bit 80s influenced, like synth-based music would fit the game. So every now and then, when I was finished coding for the night, I would take the iPad with me to bed and try to work on something like that before going to sleep. And it was like a really nice moment, first time when I got the first like music loop in the game. So I had all these elements first time together, like the basic gameplay and art and music. And for the sound effects, I actually used my iPhone quite a bit. I have this like microphone accessory to the iPhone, and it's quite decent. So I just recorded all kinds of sounds around our house and edited them together. For example, there's a ski lift in one of the levels of the stages, and that has like elements of our coffee grinder running empty, and one of my kids' Barbie toy cars and stuff like that. And the bouncy effect for the trampoline jumping, it's me hitting a balloon with my finger, like slowed really down. And that, yeah, making sounds was like, it was like really fun activity for those days. I didn't feel like coding or drawing because it's just something totally different. I also used some like synthesized sounds. Basically, the idea was that all the like real objects in the game world, like obstacles and those, their sounds sourced from the real world, and then there are these like imaginary video gamey objects like pickups and stuff like that. So those sounds made in a synthesizer. So I had been working on the game for some time when I happened to notice that there's an event called Pocket Gamer Connect Helsinki coming up, and they have this thing called Big Indie Pitch. So you can submit your game there, and then in like a speed dating fashion, get to show it to some press people and other people in the games industry and get some feedback on it. And the submissions were closing that night, so I quickly just shot some footage of the game and filled in the form, and that was it. I got in the event and also won a table space to exhibit my game. They had this like indie game showcase there. So now I had like a deadline for the game to get it to like a presentable condition, and that was a really good kick in the butt. The event itself, it was really exciting, and it was the first time ever I had shown the game to other people than my wife. The game was still really rough, and I had no business card, so I just tore some pieces from my notebook and handed those to the judges and so on. But I think the important thing is that I made the first contacts in the games industry. I met other indies and some guys from the press and Huttunen from Pelaajalehti and so on. And AppSpy, it's a site for mobile games. They even made like a video preview and interview of the game, and even said it that it might be the next viral hit or something like that. So I got some good feedback on the game, and some people were even really enthusiastic about it. And there was also one guy who told me that making this game shouldn't have taken me more than 1 hour. And I think that's the guy I remember the best from the event. But yeah, that's our really professional-looking exhibition stand there. But the most important thing for Pocket Gamer Connect was that after the event, I started to think that maybe I can actually do this on my own, like make a decent game all by myself. And I also really wanted to do this. So at that point, my wife started telling me that I should kind of start working on the game more seriously. And in my case, more seriously meant that I told my day job that I won't be returning back to job after holidays, but I'm going to be away until the end of the year to make time to make the game, because I couldn't fit it otherwise into my life. So I started working on the game like 4 days a week after that. And we also thought about other options, or our options at that point, but concluded that nobody would give money to a guy with no experience, and if I tried to get a job in the games industry, I'd be lucky to get like an entry-level intern position, or then end up doing like user experience stuff I had been doing earlier, and basically end up working on someone else's project again. So the best option was to what we concluded was to make the game alone and then kind of see if it opens up any opportunities later. Then another event was coming up. It was in London called EGX. They had this thing called Left Field Collection. It's like a showcase for indie games, and it's free for the developers to attend to. So I submitted my game there also, and got in, and I was like really super happy about it. The event was formerly called Eurogamer Expo. It was originated by the site Eurogame, and that was like a website I read almost daily. And it was the first big like gaming event I had gone to, even as a visitor. So at that point, we kind of set up our company. I made a real business cards this time and some posters to hang on the booth and so on. I also made these like secure iPhone display cases by buying like cheap iPhone cases and attaching some wire and diary locks to those. So we were like really pro. At the event, it was pretty crazy. There were like big booths for Microsoft and PlayStation and Nintendo, and I was also there with my first ever game. So yeah, that kind of made me feel like a real game developer, standing in the booth with the other talented indie guys. The event was mostly for like PC and console games, but I got good feedback on my game, and some like bigger names also played the game and gave some feedback, and also a couple of guys from Nintendo came by, and they really liked the game because of the humor and art style of it. And it was also like a really good test environment for the game's tutorial, because the game has these like touchscreen gestures which are invisible to the player during the game, so you have to teach them beforehand in the tutorial, and I was kind of struggling with that. And I also realized that I have to redo like the controls of the game when I get home, because I used first the stock gesture recognizers, which worked fine if you played the game like this. You hold the phone on one hand and then do the gestures with the other hand. But some of the players like to play the game by like trying to do the moves with 2 thumbs, and the controls didn't work like well at all for that. But yeah, I was really motivated and happy when I get back home, and really pumped to keep on working on the game. And at this point, we kind of decided that it might be best idea during the first year to try to go to all the major events we could, because I made good connections there, and motivation-wise, it was also had been really nice experiences so far. So Slush in Helsinki was coming next, and we applied there and went there. And that was really a good one for us. This is from EGX, actually, this photo. Yeah, one of the speakers at Slush was this like big indie guy from PlayStation, and I just happened to bump into him in the hallway and showed my game to him and got to introduce myself, and I have him as a contact now. And also, Apple came by our booth, and they seemed to like the game, and we had a nice chat with them, and they said that they want to help with the release of the game when we are ready to release it and so on. So after the event, I thought that instead of my first quick dirty practice project, this is now something that I have to really try to make as well as I can and put really effort into it. I felt that there are some expectations and maybe even an opportunity to make some of my lost savings back. I've been developing the game on my savings. So now with the bar set higher, I told my job that I can't finish the game by the end of the year. I need more time, so I told them I will be away for a while longer. And I ended up doing a lot of stuff in the game like several times over because my skills evolved during the process, and my first cracks at making some system or programming something usually were not that great. And also, when I made the graphics for the later levels, I noticed that the earlier graphics don't look that nice anymore because I had learned some stuff along the way. Then PAX East in Boston was coming up. I'm sorry, this kind of really focused on these events I went to because other than that, it was just basically me sitting in our little home office working on the game alone, so there's not that much to talk about there. So PAX East in Boston was coming up next, and they had this thing called Indie Mega Booth. It's like they get booth space at the convention and then collect like a nice selection of indie games to showcase there. And the idea is that this way, by like joining forces, the indies can compete with like the big studios and their mega booths in those conventions. So it felt like a really long shot, but I applied my game there also, and really couldn't believe it when I heard that I got in. And again, I made like good contacts there, and the player feedback was great. And one time I met this fellow. He was standing outside some other booth looking at a game, and I recognized him as he's a like former IGN guy, and nowadays does YouTube stuff and so on. So I just introduced myself and showed the game to him, and he seemed to like it and told me that I should let him know when the game is out, and left his email address and so on. And also I met like several like industry heroes there, and it was super nice. Then the last event before the release of the game, it was a thing called Games First, organized by Supercell here in Helsinki. It's mainly for like Finnish games industry. So, and they also had this like pitching thing for indies and new games. You have like 3 minutes to make a pitch in front of the audience, so it's like a scary but good opportunity to make an impression or like an ass out of yourself in front of an audience. So I also submitted my game there, and luckily I think the Finnish game industry liked my pitch. I got some good laughs and applause and so. And after the pitches were over, a lot of people wanted to talk to me and said that they were like inspired by my stuff and want to kind of do their own games as well. And I think that even Ilkka Paananen liked the game because he sent some people to find me at the event afterwards and introduced me to some Apple guys who were also at the event. So yeah, I remember feeling like super weird and awesome after that. Then about doing the game in practice, I work at home. We have this like a real small room in our basement floor, which is usually used for like gaming and watching movies. So I just got some table space there, and that was it. It's a bit isolated from the rest of the house, so I can concentrate even if the rest of the family is home and kids making noise. I'm also really into notebooks. Pretty much everything in the game got its first version in a notebook, and I even brought them when I went to the playground with my kids to, if I get some ideas or some spare time, I can make some sketches or think about stuff. Hardware-wise, I have a MacBook Pro and then this like laptop-sized drawing table, which you can see in the photo. It also works as a like a battery-operated portable extra display, so it's quite handy. Pretty basic stuff otherwise. I use Dropbox a lot because I have to move stuff between iOS and laptop. And also Trello is great, even for one-man studio. It's this web-based tool where you can kind of create these tasks and move them around in different columns. So I basically kept track of pretty much everything there. And the first thing I did pretty much every morning was to check my Trello and plan on what I would be or what I should be doing that day. About the graphics, most of the things got started as sketches in a notebook or in some instances on my iPad. And from there I went to Illustrator, where I drew all the elements in vector graphics, and this turned out to be a good thing because I had to later make some posters and scale those images up, and so when they originally were vectors, then I could easily do that. From Illustrator, the images went to Photoshop, where I added some like hand-painted stuff on top of them and did some maybe some effects and adjustments to levels and values. Then Photoshop creates a folder of these images, and that gets then imported into a software called Texture Packer, which basically takes all the images in a folder and creates a sprite sheet, a single image of those images, and that's way more efficient on an iOS device and takes less memory and so on than working with separate images. For the animations, I think I did them a bit stupid way, because all the animations are done in code. I didn't use any animation software. But I think it might have ended up being a good thing also, because animations usually have like these 3 stages. For example, a punch. First there's this anticipation where the hands goes back, and then there's the action itself, and then maybe like reaction part where the hand might go a bit farther and then like return to the final position. So in the game, the speed of the animations and the kind of general tempo varies by stage. They get faster as you go along. So the animations which looked really nice in slower pace ended up looking terrible in the faster pace, because all the anticipation and reaction were just too much, and all the secondary movements, so the action itself would kind of get lost in the animation. But when I had done all by coding, I could just add some variables and logic to make different aspects of the animation kind of dependent on the timing of the level. So that turned out pretty well. Probably you can do that using some animation software as well, but that worked for me. So here's an image of the software called Core Gadget, which I mentioned earlier. All the music is done in that. It's an iPad software, and basically I run the tracks through a like audio mastering app on the iPad. It's called Final Touch, and then via Dropbox I just imported those files first into Adobe Audition to kind of change the file format, and then straight to my game. Uh, yeah, about some other workflow stuff. First, I tried to maintain all the like combo stuff and move data manually. It's this property list file, basically like a XML tree, which has all the different input sequences and then the name and score of the combo those inputs translate to. But as the number of moves or combos got bigger and bigger, it became impossible to maintain by hand. And there's also the player can, for example, do the moves in different order, and that should result to the same combo as the different order and so on. So I ended up doing this spreadsheet for the combo data in numbers. It's like a Apple's Excel, basically. I exported it as a CSV file, sorry, and then I made like this simple Mac app which takes that file and converts it to the final property list XML format. Overall, the combo system turned out to be like a really huge pain in the back, and I had to redo it several times over and over, and it still doesn't in every situation work just like I would like it to, but I guess it's good enough. And the other tricky parts were like the controls, and I also had some physics problems every now and then. But yeah, I tried to pay quite a lot of attention to the animations and especially the kind of jumping feel of the game, because that's pretty much all there is to the game, how the camera works and so on. Then about staying motivated and getting the work done while working alone. I think this is like a big thing for first-time game developer, especially when you are doing things alone for the first time. So when I started to work on the game more seriously, I just tried to kind of have the mentality that this is my job now, and I started at morning after breakfast and finished up by the dinner time, and then maybe continued to work a little bit after that before going to bed. And it helped that most of the time I really enjoyed my work. And in my earlier design work, it would sometimes take a lot of time from the design phase to seeing the finished product. But in this case, it was just super fast. I could just come up with an idea and test it out and see how it works, and then make some changes and test it out again and so on. And it's inspiring and motivating to see your stuff come together and see that you can actually make something. But that said, at least part of my creative process is like doubting myself pretty much every step of the way. So most of the time I was just pretty certain that I'm a total fraud and what I'm doing is a waste of time and useless garbage. So going to events and getting feedback from players really helped with this, and even though still I often kind of managed to convince myself that I had just somehow tricked all the people into thinking that there's something good about my game. Also, my family helped a lot with this. I could not have made this game without my wife and my daughter. She's now soon 5 years old. The game is way too difficult for her, but still she says to me often that it's the greatest game ever made, and that's nice. So I think you need to have some like support systems in place, especially if you are doing it all by yourself, because if you are feeling down and not productive, then the work just doesn't get done. There's no progress on the project. So I think this is very important. Then about the release of the game, we let the Apple guys know that our game was ready to be released and about the release date, and I did some trailers and promo artwork and stuff like that. And we sent this guy we had met at PG Connect from ARTtech startup. We sent this guy a build of the game, and he made an interview and a story about the game. It's a big blog covering like the Nordic startup scene. And I tweeted Huttunen from Pelaajalehti about the game, and the next morning there was an article on the Pelaajalehti site about the game release. And also I posted about the game to the like Finnish game developer Facebook groups and stuff like that, and I got lots of compliments and many guys in the Finnish scene showed their support to the game. There's Puha and Aki Järvelehto and people like that. And also the Greg Miller guy who I had met at PAX, he tweeted about the game to his followers, and that was really nice. We also made a press release and tried to contact media and YouTubers as you are supposed to, but this led pretty much to nothing. I think we might have been a bit late with this and should have tried to secure some coverage earlier. But yeah, despite several attempts, we failed to get one of the bigger sites like Pocket Game or Touch Arcade to review the game. But I emailed Pocket Gamer later, and they said that they had somehow kind of missed the release and made a new story about the release with some first gameplay impressions then, and it was nice. Some smaller German and Russian sites made reviews, and they were all positive. And in the App Store, the game got to the, it's in the lower right corner there, it got to the best new games list in 150 countries, I think. It wasn't in the best first spots on the list, but still I was happy about it. And then just recently they had this banner, 15 weirdest games on the front page of the App Store, and my game was on the number 3 on that list, so I was really happy about that. The user reviews of the game are usually 5 stars, so the people who have found the game seem to like it, but then there are the people who don't like the game. It's usually then 1 star, so it's either totally awesome or the dumbest game ever made. But it's a challenging game, so I think that was to be expected. So, about results. I ended up wasting or using a lot more time on the game than I had previously planned. In the beginning, the idea was to make a quick and dirty project and move on to a better game after that. But in a way, I think this became that a bit better game in the process. And yeah, it was a really good crash course into 2D game development. By doing everything alone, I think I got a good overview of all the different tasks it takes to make a game. Sales-wise, I think the game has performed pretty much as a game with a price tag usually does in that kind of promo spot. We made some money, but it would have been definitely more financially smart to stay at my day job. But hey, it was my first game and I was not doing it for the money. So overall, I think I kind of got more out of the game that I could have ever imagined achieving with my first game. I got featured by Apple and in some big events and stuff like that. And I hope that these kind of achievements will be helpful when I'm kind of trying to find my way towards that bigger game at some point. So, some lessons learned. You can make a game alone, and you can get it noticed by the big guys. But this then doesn't necessarily guarantee anything, because lots of games get made and featured every day. But I think it's important to start small. I decided that I can only do a small amount of stuff, but I tried to do that small amount as well as I could. Also, different can be good. For example, I don't think my game would have been selected to those events and got the attention it got if I hadn't made those choices regarding the art style and the kind of a bit different game concept. I think online you can see that many people start with doing a Flappy Bird clone or 2048 clone, so clone of a clone basically as their first game, but I think you can learn so much more by doing something original from the start. But I'm also not sure if the general audience respects different stuff as much as the people in the games industry. But I was still happy about this decision because my goal was to kind of maybe get my name out there a bit and make a first game and then see where that leads me. And also I would say that don't worry too much about what you are making. It's just most important thing is to just start making stuff. And also get out there with your game and get out of your comfort zone. I'm actually really like a shy, silent guy, and I hate drawing attention to my stuff I'm making. So this whole experience has kind of forced me to challenge myself in that regard as well. But I'm sure that if I had just stayed in my little basement room making a game alone, I wouldn't have made those connections and get all the attention to game. And I still wouldn't probably know anyone in the games industry. So I think events are good, maybe. I think that also depends on the case. At least those bigger events, you get definitely more out of them with a non-mobile game because they are usually like console and PC centric. And this might not work for everybody, but worth a shot at least. And also one thing I learned is that people are nice, but usually busy. So there are very nice people out there who are willing to help you, but they also have like their inbox is full and so on. So I think you should kind of treat every nice thing you get out of people as a nice surprise present and not to expect anything. Also, I think marketing, PR, and like business things are really important, but unfortunately I had no that much time to focus on those. And we clearly made some mistakes there, but hey, there's time to learn more stuff later. Yeah, so start making games. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks, Juho, for a great chat. Are there any questions for Juho?
I'd have one. If you're comfortable talking about money, how much did you, in what sort of scale do you need to have something to start with? How much did it take to actually get this game out there? How much did you have of savings that you spent? If you're comfortable, I do have a backup question.
Yeah. Well, the development itself, it was not that costly because I was doing it by myself, so it's mostly about the lost revenue from not going to work that's at stake here. And we made calculations at what kind of amount of money we need per month. And my wife, after maternity leave, returned to her job and told that she can support the family after. So I burnt some of my savings initially and then kind of transitioned to my wife supporting the family. Yeah, the sales, they are like a five-figure sum, but it's not. It was maybe less than what we expected or hoped for, but still satisfied with it. Is that enough?
Is it enough to continue with your next project, or do you think that's you're going to go back to doing business?
It's not enough to make my big dream game, at least, but I think I can make a next smaller game or a prototype of the next one, at least. I think my like day job, they are still willing to take me back and maybe as a part-time work or so. So we are kind of thinking about different options and making like family financial calculations at this point. So, but I plan on keeping doing this anyway, at least some way or another.
Are there any other questions for Juho?
Yeah, now that you've got the game out, are you done with it, or are you planning on releasing to other platforms like Android?
Yeah, there are plans regarding Android, but again, I'm just one guy making this. So, and there are also some plans to update the game and add a little bit more content and make some small changes here and then. But I have to kind of plan what is the best or most effective way to use my time. But yeah, Android version is not out of the question, at least.
Thanks, Juho, for your time. And come back for the next talk at 4. It's going to be about going from students to indie game developers. Thank you.
Thank you.